Well, you said earlier, you said rent's due and you got to get old. And I'll finish up the tweets of the week with a couple of just recruiting / roster management kind of tweets.
Yeah.
This first one here, college football transfers who want to be immediately eligible without a waiver for 2022 season must provide their school with a written request to enter the transfer portal by May 1st. So essentially, it's going to be a busy week. And then along those lines, we're big on in-state recruiting on the Redcast here. And a couple tweets from Scottsbluff High School that Barrett Rude was out there last week. And then here's Monarch Football, Papiola Vista. And they had Mickey Joseph there and just saying that they're happy to have him out there.
Yeah.
And the way that, let's talk recruiting a bit. How do you rebuild your team? There's multiple ways to do it. Something you have an option at now that you didn't 10 years ago is that transfer portal. You can get old in a hurry if you get the right guys.
Yeah.
But the Texas Tech guy who has 900 snaps under his belt, the Texas Tech defensive lineman who was in town this weekend, that's a guy that has some experience. But you bring someone else in the transfer portal that doesn't, there's no guarantee that guy's going to give you immediate playing time any more than the guy's already on your staff.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Nebraska's in a little bit of a conundrum because, conventional wisdom says, hey, desperate times call for desperate measures. But if you're Nebraska, you're still trying to establish your culture. And there's a super fine line between being desperate and taking what's available because you think it can help you. And for those guys, you have to be careful because one of the things that's gotten away from Nebraska that I think that they've really got to get back to is I'm big into you have to speak it into existence. Say it out loud. And you have to acknowledge some things. And I think Nebraska has to say out loud, we are a developmental program, right? What we do is we develop. Our freshman classes should supplement. They should be in addition to. They can't supplant what we're doing. Nebraska doesn't need to be in the business of playing freshmen immediately. You need to be sprinkling in your redshirt freshmen, starting redshirt sophomores and juniors, and then turning those guys over to the next level. It's all about development. So they have to be careful with the portal. It can be a little bit of fool's gold. I know there's a tendency to panic because I think people think Coach Frost may be on the clock, but you cannot compromise. The thing that will – it's just my opinion, but the thing that I think will really serve Nebraska well is I like their game plan, especially early on from a recruiting standpoint. Got a chance to spend a lot of time with Vince Ginta. I obviously know Mickey Joseph really well. I'm a huge Brian Applewhite fan. I see what these guys are doing and what the plan is. Coach Frost will tell you guys, hey, listen, I'm so competitive. I kind of got out of my comfort zone. I recruited some guys early on in my tenure that I ordinarily wouldn't have recruited. I took some chances trying to win, and it caught up with them. So what I think they want to do now is they're caught between a rock and a hard place because I like the philosophy that they're showing in terms of they're getting back to the 500-mile radius. Character really matters. Coming from winning programs matters. They really want to focus on making sure that once you get guys in the fold, they're not looking over their shoulder to go to the next best place. So that comes with some characteristics that come with this recruiting area. So I like that. I do. And there's plenty of good players. And I don't care if they're along the O-line, D-line, or they're skill guys. Plenty of good guys that I think that they can focus on. Then you sprinkle it in with your coasts, right? Your Texas, your Floridas, your Californias. Get back into St. Louis. Get back into Kansas City. You got hidden gold mines up there now it's outside the radius, but you've got a really good feel for what's happening in Ohio. And I know, listen, that's big bad Ohio State territory, and that's fine. They can't get everybody. And so when you follow that blueprint and you get back to development, everybody else that you bring in has to fit your culture. I actually think that's one of the beauties to the transfer portal. There's more information known. There's more people to talk to. There's usually a track record or a body of work. So I liken it to going to the grocery store, but who you're asking for the recommendation has already tasted what you want to buy. You get to decide if you think that can fit your palate or not. That's kind of, if I was Nebraska, how I would use.
Yeah, I mean that's my feel on bringing in the kid from Texas Tech this last week and who has
Sure.
900 snaps under him. Whether he comes here or not isn't my point. I haven't watched any film on him. I know nothing about him personally, but they have 900 snaps of Power 5 plays on him. You better have a pretty good understanding if you want the guy or not.
Right.
The thing that is a little concerning or different right now is you have transfer portal on one end, then you also have NIL. How does NIL affect kids? Like, for instance, like Rodgers or someone that's been grinding here for 3-4 years, and maybe you don't have the big NIL, or you tend to get your NIL by going out and putting yourself on the market. And you're hearing all about whether it's Mathis or somebody else, they're going to come in here and make the big payday. Well, is that the incentive to want to leave? And you're trying to build that culture, like you said, Damon. So how do you build that culture if people that have been in it for 3 or 4 years are testing the waters, and people that are coming in are getting the NIL, and that's the incentive right now to do nationally?
Now, this is easy for me to say because my job isn't on the line.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same thing I told Coach Frost a couple weeks ago. And this is the $64,000 question, right? Because it's a fantastic question, but this is what I would do. And I'm not saying that Nebraska shouldn't play the NIL game. I'm not saying that you can't go out and get good players, but I would challenge folks to just sit down and think for a second. Before we're up in arms about what's going on with NIL, and we got to ask ourselves, okay, hey, what's the desired outcome? Who do we want? Who are we recruiting? And the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the Oklahomas, the USCs, if we're going to clearly be in the discussion where we're going to come to recruiting battles with these guys where NIL is going to matter, then we got to win more games.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's big,
But we get so caught up, right? The devil's in the details. So we're enamored with, oh my gosh, well, Alabama can pay this and Oklahoma can pay. Hey guys, newsflash, we're not competing with those teams.
Yeah. Damon, right? I got a question for you here. I mean, there's a nationally ranked quarterback that is a legacy here. And we have a question from Jim in Minnesota. And if they could do it over, what might Nebraska do differently with Dylan Raiola's spring game visit? And look, I asked this question because I know you made one reference to it on a show about a week ago, but it goes bigger than this, is that Raiola could commit tomorrow. He could commit to Nebraska tomorrow. Good. And it doesn't matter, right? Because if we go out and go 3-9, he's probably never going to come here anyways. I mean, so
you're really never off the market anymore.
Right. So there's two things, and Jim in Minnesota is fantastic. He's a smart guy too. So I can talk to him like this. There's a couple things I would have done differently with Dylan. Number one, it's going to sound crazy. Okay. He needed more attention. They needed to reach out and engage and talk more. Hey, how you doing? It's weird with 2024s. I know because I have one in my house, and so you have to initiate. It's tricky, right? You just can't pick up the phone, but you can work around existing relationships. You can set up times to text. There's lots of ways to work around it, right? If I'm Nebraska, I try harder. I lay it on the line. The other thing is you take advantage of your resources. A lot of guys know Dom really well. A lot of guys that are around the program. There's some good insight there in terms of the family structure, what his wife likes, what he doesn't like, kind of how the family is. They got a guy down there, Jay Foreman, who's best friends with Dominic Raiola. Would have been a really good resource. And I say all that to say, make sure when you're putting your plan together that you've maximized. If you leave some stuff on the table or you don't feel like you gave it what you had, then you don't have anything to be mad about. And as I kind of look back at the Dylan Raiola thing, there's two things that I need Nebraska to do. Number one, don't let the results be indicative of how you feel about yourself. there's this feeling sometimes that I get that the staff or the players sometimes think they don't belong because they haven't won enough. So it's like if I'm back in high school and I'm not very good looking, or I'm in college and there's somebody that I think is more attractive than me and she may be out of my league and I'm not very confident, I may stumble and bumble and not really maximize kind of trying to quarter, right? Because I don't believe in me.
Gotcha.
And it shows up because it's being compared to all the other suitors. Sure. So Nebraska's pitch and Nebraska's game plan is being compared to USC, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and those things get relayed back, right? So you do this immediacy of compare and contrast.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think better of yourself. You have to tell yourself, if you're the University of Nebraska, we belong. We
kind of goes back to what you were saying too, with recruiting and going up against. You got to win more games. You feel better about yourself. You feel prettier if you're winning some more games.
Yeah, but see, so it's the exact same thing in the fourth quarter when Nebraska starts checking the rearview mirror, right? They start looking, they're peeking, they're looking behind. Because they haven't been there and they don't feel worthy, they look for reasons to not continue driving. Man, we made it this far. How have we not ran out of gas? You know what I mean? Like, I like analogies because I think everybody can relate to them, at least in some degree. Nebraska's the team that wants so desperately to be good, but they have to figure out how to get from wanting to believe to actually believing. Because one you can see, the other you only hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, as terrible as my eyesight is, I see a lot better than I hear, right? You can tell me anything.
Right.
But I much rather watch you act.
Rob,
would you say that Nebraska, because you said you like analogies, so I thought of a really good one. Nebraska's starting to kind of become maybe that peaked in high school guy, where because you and I were about the same age. You're same age as these guys right here, and I've got kids that are probably old enough to play. They're just not athletes. But they haven't really won since 97 was like the last
national championship.
They did have some winning years, but now all of a sudden it's starting to become the used to be's, right? And so I'm wondering if maybe that's a syndrome that after we go 15-0 this year, as I keep telling everybody we're going to do, and you can make that face, but I look at the schedule and I'm hoping that they get this D line here. Do you think that it's starting to become that sort of situation a little bit?
So I remember I'm in the solutions business. So there's a couple of options, right? You can't hop back in the time machine and go back to 97. You can't go back to 99. You can't even go back to the last second in, the Big 12 and playing Texas. But it's not that long ago with a team like Mike Riley, who's off been maligned, and Nebraska was number 7 in the country.
Yeah.
And then this is going to sound weird, but I'm big into getting the most out of things. And for as disrespectful and dismissive as we are about that era and that transition, if it truly was that bad, somehow they got to number 7 in the country. and so I think to myself, if they can do it,
right,
we can do it.
Well, these are way better teams.
And so it doesn't have to be a deal. Just because it has been, doesn't mean it always will be.
Yeah.
And the minute you subscribe to that, guys, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
We were fan base.
We were 7-0 that year in 2016 and didn't really know exactly how good or bad we were yet. We didn't play the greatest schedule up to that point, be an Oregon team that wasn't, a great Oregon team by any means. And it was that 8th game. It was at Wisconsin.
We didn't know it at the time, though.
Well, but it was the Wisconsin game where we lose in overtime at Camp Randall, and they were top 10, I think, or top 25, and we were top 10. And we lose that game, but it was so close. And Ohio State had beat Wisconsin in overtime at Camp Randall. So it's like, oh my goodness. So the next week, Redcast Dave and I fly out to Columbus to go and watch that game. And we're on the flight out there, and these guys, the guy that, I mean, we start talking Husker football. So all these people around us are like, hey, you guys should do a podcast. And they start talking football with us. And they're like, well, what do you think's going to happen? And I'm like, I'm not saying we're going to beat Ohio State, but I think what I saw against Wisconsin gave me confidence to say this is going to be a 4-quarter game. And what I saw with my eyes was it wasn't a 4-play game. And that's the 62-3 destruction. And it's just, how does a top 10 team lose like that? I mean, I don't know, but that leads us into areas that are completely different discussions. I want to keep talking solutions. One of the solutions is we're big into in-state recruiting, and you're going to see a name here that's probably familiar. He's in your house, but these are the in-state recruits that in 2023, we already have 3 kids from in-state, Gunnar Gottschalk, Benjamin Bramer, and Sam Sledge. And you look at that, that's Lincoln, it's Omaha, it's Pierce. Now we have 4 more that we've offered. And this is everything from Scotts Bluff, again, back into the metro, 7 offers to this in-state. And of course, there's a lot of talk about the one kid we didn't get, Gretna and going down to Oklahoma State, but my goodness, to offer 7. And then here we are already into 2024 with the offers to your son, and then Davon Hall and Danny Kalen, and then 2025 even. So the offers are out there, and the way to rebuild this program from the inside out, that 500-mile radius, has to start there. Yeah. I guess I'll kind of stop for a second there. And I mean, when you see that stat, when you're looking at those names and those numbers, I mean, does that give you some hope there? Does that make you feel good that they are definitely serious about trying to close down the borders again?
Absolutely. Just being around these guys since the new staff has been hired, listening to what some of the plans are, watching guys be recruited firsthand. I mean, Mickey was just here last week, and I talked to Coach Chenander this morning and trying to devise a plan. They know how many visits left they have at the school and who should tag team, and when to bring Coach Fisher in, because Coach Fisher isn't usually recruiting Nebraska, but they'd like to let some guys talk to potentially who could be coaching him. And what I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, 4 for sure, you guys, if you want to be encouraged, it's much more organized. And I don't say that to say, oh man, in 2018, it was this, and this. Again, I'm solutions. My glass is half full. Much more organized than I've seen it, where a Coach Fisher will text me on Friday and say, hey, listen, 2024 is I can't reach out. Can we do this, and this? And then we get going, and then we schedule the visits. And then we talk about other strategic kids in the metro and how to get to these schools and who needs to be seeing them. These are things that in the last 4 years, guys, I haven't heard. When I first saw Barrett Ruud, I was doing the spring game, that staff's first year, and he was crossing the street. We were going across the street from the Champions Club. And he said, I asked him how he liked it. And he said, it's different. It's different than recruiting down in Orlando, and it's this, that, and the other. And he says, I'm driving 6 hours almost in between recruits. Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, that was going way up to see Garrett Nelson and then coming to see Nick Henrich and Chris Hickman, right? So it's gradually gotten better. Now, Nebraska's got to ramp their game up too, right? It's what's our philosophy? Who are we? And how does it fit? Once you start to strategically answer those questions, it gives you a better plan of attack. Listen, I'm probably Zane Flores' biggest fan. I think in my coaching tenure against him, we lost the biggest one. That was the state championship. But I have a losing record. I'm sure it's like 2-3 maybe. He's been beating me since he's been in the 6th grade, right? So when I watch him, I understand. See, I can still cheer for Zane Flores and know that he's a fantastic player. But for whatever the reason, he doesn't get the Nebraska offer. And I'm not mad at Nebraska for it, and I'm not mad at Zane Flores. What I'm thinking is, this is what I hope. Remember, glass half full of solutions. We got our 2023 guy. We like Watson. We like the way it fits. We've done our homework. Have some conviction. Don't be the guy that's talking to the girl that shot his shot that doesn't really feel good about himself. So 6-7 minutes later, he's saying something different to her, right? She's already made her mind up by then. Just have some conviction in what you're doing, and you're going to make some mistakes. You're not always going to get it right. but you have to have conviction in who you are, and other people will start to respond to that. Because if you're 15 different things to 15 different people, those guys talk. And bad news will always beat you home.
Sure.
So for Nebraska, it's more about establishing their culture and identity than going grocery shopping after you know what you want to cook.
I follow recruiting somewhat closely, but I don't follow like Nebraska high school sports that well. That's something I've always, when I tune into your show, you guys always drop some knowledge on that. So I can, and you've been coaching in it for years, so you're very much in touch with that. But I have always picked up on perception or not that there's a disconnect between the UNL and the Metro.
Yeah.
And could that be some of it's the organization you were talking about, no doubt. But could some of it be as simple as winning games? I mean, you got a son, we're about the same age. When my kids watch me watch Husker football, they simply do not understand how I still get upset about us losing, because it's, Dad, we've always lost since I've been, born. We've never been a very good team. So could some of the Metro disconnect be as simple as, hey, we've got some really good players in the Metro, and maybe they're not very interested in going and playing for a team that has struggled their entire life? Are we making too much of the relationships between the coaching staff and the Metro, or could some of it just be wins and losses?
All right, so two things can be true at once, right? Like, yes, I think it's a little overblown because Nebraska got off to a really good start recruiting in-state.
Yep, Henrich, Hickman.
First couple of years, I mean, they were swinging for the fences and they were getting guys. Now he had and I said this right when he got there, just because I knew the families, right? When you start talking about Caden Helms and Mike O'Reilly Ducker and some of these guys, it's a different kind of recruitment, because those are families that didn't necessarily grow up diehard Nebraska fans that that wanted opportunities to get outside of the state. The Avante Dickersons of the world always had an affinity to want to leave the state of Nebraska. It was going to be a tough road to hoe. So everybody kind of has a different case. Now, what happened from that, and I'm right dab smack in the middle of it in the Metro, so I can hear, is, well, Nebraska isn't doing this, or Nebraska doesn't do this. And to some degree, the effort wasn't there, but it didn't have much to do with why those players weren't going. The Helms, the Riley, those guys weren't coming to Nebraska. And they told him early, hey, thanks, but no thanks. We're looking for other opportunities. Keegan Johnson, they took it down to the wire. Now, that was tough, right? Because you went from Troy Walters to Coach Lubick, and Keegan, just his personality is very regimented. What do I need to do? Tell me how this looks to you. I'm a checkbox kind of guy. I'll go figure out how to get it done. That transition into kind of telling the story allowed a school like Iowa to get in there and get. Listen, you got to give the devil his due. LeVar Woods and those guys, they do a good job.
Yeah,
I'm watching it firsthand. They do a good job, but it's nothing that is insurmountable. I listen to Coach Joseph. I listen to Coach Fisher. I listen to Coach Chenander. I listen to Coach Woods. I listen to Coach Jackson, all these guys that recruit. Nebraska has to just figure out and believe we belong.
Yeah. The emphasis is clear as day different. I mean, there was
no question.
There was a 10-year damn gap after Niles Paul and DJ Jones. Yeah. And you get what would they get, like Michael Decker,
like
and
there weren't players coming out of there.
Deshaun Neal. I think they got those two like the first year of Riley, but that was like, even that, I mean, you're still losing Noah Fance along the way, and you're losing Harrison Phillips in bizarre ways too. I mean, just the emphasis, like people.
The last 5 months, they've been at Papio South, Bryan, Benson, Papillion, Creighton Prep, Burke, Central, West Side. Stopped at Northwest. Wanted to introduce themselves. The concerted effort to just be visible has ramped up tenfold in the last 5 months. That's not made up. I've seen it firsthand with my own eyes. They've been to Bellevue East. check in at Bellevue East and see when the last time they've seen Nebraska at Bellevue East. And they've been to Bellevue East this winter. That's the real deal.
I've seen all the tweets. The effort is there. And I agree too. I mean, it's one thing if we're talking about Omaha being a 1 year issue a year ago. If that was the one case, like you said, the recruiting becomes an individual thing at some point. I mean,
it really is.
You break it down to the kid, but if we're making it something more systemic, I haven't seen that certainly with this staff. And from day one, this staff I think has been really serious about getting in state. Pandemics affect things with how much you can go and and actually see them.
Guys, I'm just telling you, Tyson, Terry, and Caleb are practically best friends, but you would recruit them vastly differently, right? I mean, they played on the same middle school team. He lives about 5 minutes from me, but you would recruit them significantly different. So recruiting is definitely an individual deal.